There you go. I'm recording.
That's a new hat.
Yeah, I think I got this hat right before I asked my wife to marry me, and that was a while ago, around 2007, 2008. I never wore it, and it doesn't fit. I usually have like a shaved head, and it doesn't fit unless I have long hair. So I had long hair when I asked her to marry me. I had long hair, so it's
right.
now it fits.
Yep, there you go. What you been up to this week?
Moving dirt.
Okay.
We have the water's coming up.
Yep.
And we never built a dock. Like the area next to the water we just haven't given it any care, and the seawall is rotted, and so I pulled up some of the rotted wood on the seawall and have been moving dirt and moving sand, trying to make it nice so that the kids can play in. Like we want to make like a little beach area right there next to the water.
Yeah.
So I've been moving dirt.
What are you using to move the dirt?
A shovel and a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
And then I've been learning how to maintain boat motors. So I have a boat that I haven't changed the oil in it for like 3 years, and so that's not good. You're supposed to change the oil every year. So I've looked into the 1-year maintenance plans and the 3-year maintenance plans, and then my in-law gave me this small John boat. So I've got 2 boat motors I have to maintenance. And then I also, this is on my list, I've got this camera that I want to put on my trees and then take a time lapse, hopefully time lapse. I'd like to bend it with something like, if I live at this house for 2 or 3 years, it would be a time lapse of 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And have all that change.
Yep. Sounds good.
You can see my trees.
The boat thing is, I'm assuming your water is entirely fresh, right?
It is. It's fresh. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it gets a little muddy and stuff, but with sediment. But yeah, there's no brackish or salt water.
Yeah, good. Because our boat that we kept in the family, it was basically oscillating between brack to semi-salt, depending on the state of the lagoon, and then in the ocean when we went cray fishing and what have you. But and I use it for. So my dad was the cray fisher, and I was less interested in that, and I used it in my student days for water skiing and just general fun. And years later, then for a long time the boat didn't get used, and my kids are old enough to sort of I'd start taking them out on the boat, and the heater kept going off. Oh, what's going on here? And then I discovered that I hadn't been flushing the engine correctly. And quite a lot of corrosion through the cooling passages and whatnot.
Yeah, you have an impeller. Like I've actually learned about boats in general. You have this impeller that's supposed to do water cooling, and you have to. If you don't keep up with that impeller, you can ruin a motor.
That's right. And when you flush it, you're supposed to run it for a sufficient enough time for the thermostat to open, to actually get the fresh water to go through other passages rather than just bypassing. And that's where I fell short. One takes the shortcut and say, oh shit, that'll be good enough, and of course over time it wasn't.
Yeah, it's crazy how often I've had to learn from my own mistakes instead of learning from other people's mistakes. And sometimes it's expensive.
Yeah, and you sort of tell yourself, I'd rather do this because it saves me time now. So I'm not going to go and look. I'm not going to investigate what the proper way is doing this, because I've convinced myself that this is good enough, and of course that rarely works in your favor.
Well, it took me. I was researching boats last weekend for 3 or 4 hours trying to just learn how to take care of a boat, and then going shopping for all the things I needed and spending a few $100s. It's like, yeah, it takes a lot of investment of time and energy. It's that whole idea of your possessions possess you. You have to put in that
Yes.
effort.
Yeah. And it's very much a and we seem to, in the West, seem to do things for recreation.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure in a fully integrated life whether you should be spending so much, whether, you know, those things should be integrated into your meaningful existence and not just doing them as pastimes.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the goal. What's the goal? And if your goal is recreation, actually was in a live chat yesterday talking about this. We talked about psychedelics, and I would explain. We just always seem to want to just go have fun, you know, and that's the wrong, that's especially with psychedelics, that's the wrong way to go, because they'll kill you if you go out and just try to have fun. But you know, and there's a place for them, but they're not for everyone. But the thing is every experience is a mind-altering experience, and if you go into it just trying to have fun, you could be aiming at something different. So like with my boats, I'm learning how these boats work. I'm learning a valuable skill, and then I have a neighbor he's very nice. They have nice neighbors here. It's part of the reason I'm here, but he'll come over and just pick up a shovel and start moving dirt with me. You know, I've got neighbors like that. And so you know, the old way of being, the old Gavin would just do everything by myself. Like I would just go take care of this motor by myself, but he offered help, and so I'm thinking about trying to get over there and work with him. And the thing is he's got so much wisdom. He's already made a lot of mistakes. That's
the kind of guy who you want to hang out a bit with and just sort of
I've told him a few times. I said, you know, so much I don't know. And so but yeah, hopefully we'll work on my boat together, my boat motors together.
Yep.
So the boat motor is no longer just we're fixing the boat so we can go skiing, which we don't even have skis, but and that's the thing, like the reason I bought the boat is because I was thinking about the experiences we'll have as a family. And, you know, I was thinking that I think that will be good for the family. So it's more about, you know, community at that point, right? And learning and being a part of, trying to have a community.
Whereas by the time I got the boat, once we were sort of grown up, and so my dad and I got to spend, as adults, a lot of quality time on the boat, and he used to take his friends in that community, and then I'd take my friends, and it was more of a sort of friendship bonding.
And you broke his boat
device. So yeah, it was, and yeah, the sad part is that out of that group of friends, they've all moved on. I've kept in touch with 2 out of, let's say, 10 of them, which is good, you know, at least although those 2, the boat was incidental, it wasn't primary, so right. I can't say that any deep meaningful things happened as a result of the boat. And yet I spent so much time on, you know, mucking around with the boat. So it's but having you know, a core family with young kids, I think it can be a great tool for that, as just something for your children, you know, something as for a young family to do together. Absolutely.
Well, I grew up going wading in the river, and so we can take the boat to the river and wade, and it's like there's experiences you have, like no matter what, like if you have a boat, there's a set of experiences that open up to you. You don't necessarily need a boat, though. You can use a canoe, for example, which is like a cheap boat. right?
Yeah, sure. Which I did with my dad. We
Yeah.
always had lagoons on the canoes on the farm.
That's what I did with my dad is we just had a canoe for the most
Yeah.
part.
And yeah, we had these. It's a I wouldn't quite know. It's a vegetable that grows in freshwater dams, and it produces these seed heads, which the ducks love like crazy. And it's a indigenous plant in South Africa in the Western Cape, and it makes a great stew when mixed in with lamb or something like that. So this was a favorite of my father's. So we used to go and harvest this stuff on the canoe. That was great fun. Because for him it was something productive,
Yeah.
which was very much part of his sort of mindset. Had to be productive,
Yeah.
but and then a great sort of hunting and gathering, which is we did a bit of that on the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah. We
is,
would we'd harvest catfish. Like
yeah.
so I remember my father and his friend, Danny Skutek, they had these Hawaiian slings. And my brother and I would have masks and we'd swim down and look under rocks and find catfish, and we'd come up and we'd wave and they'd come over with the slings and spear catfish and then
Right.
throw them in the cooler.
Yep.
I did see my dad one time. He came up, he had a catfish in both hands. He had barehanded caught two of them at once.
Yeah.
But yeah, that we like to go harvest catfish. That's fun. That's
Yep.
not the lazy way of harvesting. That's the actual way where you do exercise. There's different ways to go catfishing.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen sort of guys hang what sort of noodling, I don't know what the term is, but they
Yeah.
seem to just end up gripping them in their mouths or something. I haven't been too interested enough just to exactly find out what the technique was, because
Well,
I'm not.
the laziest way is to just put the bait out and attract them in.
Yeah.
Let the fish come to you. But
Yep.
so how's your life going?
Yeah, it's some weeks are better than others, and this was quite a stressful work week.
Yeah.
So I did finish sort of a section on the thing, and I think it's put it this way: we've got a
You're calling it the thing, like there's no official name for it. What do you
I don't know what I don't know what to call it.
we call it an it and a thing.
Yeah.
It's the map, the mapping of the Bible to the future, something like that.
Yeah, but the thing is just easier to say because the
Jason's eschatology.
No,
No.
keep my name out of it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm obviously going to be a part of it, but I don't want it in the title.
Yeah. Okay. I understand.
Because the thing is humility, right?
I understand. Well, the thing, like it can be interpreted. I see what you're saying. It's
yeah.
But that's the thing that bothers. It's the thing I've been talking about this week in my recordings. It's like if you say Jason's eschatology, it's like, yeah, it didn't even occur to me that that's a brag, right?
Yeah.
It's actually a
well,
it can be perceived.
Yeah,
it can be perceived as correct. Like the most humble thing, though, because you realize like this whole process is you're putting yourself out there to be humiliated. It's like you're really putting yourself out there, and it's
to have slings and arrows tossed at me, to say, oh, who do you think you are, etc.
That's what I've been trying to communicate to Grimgriz. It's like this is something you do very reluctantly. You don't rush it. You like, it would be great if God just poofed the temple into existence. I was listening to Paul Vanderklay ask Jacob the other day, well, how do you know when the Messiah has come according to a Jewish view? And they said there will be a temple and it won't be built by God's hands. And so I'm like, well, what does that mean? It's like, could that be the CHE? But it would be nice if we didn't have to do any work and poof, it was right where it needed to be. Everything, the temple was exactly the way it needed to be. Like that
Yep.
would be great.
Well, so what I lay out in this, let's call it Jason's thesis for now.
Thesis. Okay.
Yeah. Is that there are these two central, what are they? All-encompassing statements that apply to the whole Bible. So I told the end from the beginning, and there's nothing new under the sun. What was before will be again. So these two terms weaved into it. So one is from Isaiah and the other one is from Ecclesiastes. And they are, people always say context, Bible. So I've built the logic largely around that. So there's this passage in the end where it says, and the New Jerusalem descended down from heaven, right? I'm going to kill my video because just for a while, it's my connection's becoming unstable.
And I hear a storm outside, so I hope I don't lose connection or anything. That's the penalty of moving into a place that's more rural.
Yep. It's all good. So anyway, I'll leave my video off for a while and I'll try it.
Jerusalem will descend from heaven.
Yep.
Sounds like a spaceship.
Yeah. So immediately, so you referenced Jacob saying it won't be built by God's hands, but that's sort of implying it's going to poof into existence. But of course, the tabernacle and the various instantiations of the temples were built structures. And then what Ecclesiastes says, what was before will be again, and I told the end from the beginning. And at no point during the biblical structure did a temple poof into existence, like it's implying in Revelation might be the expectation. But of course, the first, the pattern for the tabernacle was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, and then he descended from the mountain with a pattern in his head, and they then proceeded to build it. So the tabernacle descended down the mountain in Moses's memory. It was given to him at the mountaintop, and then he came down the mountain with the knowledge of the temple. So that is technically it descended.
Where is the descended from heaven part? Like, I guess I wonder where Jacob gets the idea that it will not be built with human hands.
Okay, so now that is Jacob's correct. That is very much part of the eschatology. God made that statement several times throughout the Bible. Now, I've been so this is the one passage which has troubled me, because there is a structure that's going to be built. Now bear in mind that the Ezekiel's vision, there's no roof in Ezekiel's vision for the temple, there's no description of a roof. It's just not mentioned. So those are the, I don't know, final chapters of Ezekiel's Ezekiel is the description of the temple. What it does describe is the river coming out from under the door of the temple and then becoming progressively deeper the further away it gets from the temple, and it flows down towards the Dead Sea. Now, so the CHE has no roof. Ezekiel's temple has no roof. Ezekiel's temple has a river flowing out of it. The CHE has a river flowing out of it. What the CHE does is it's filled with chambers of clouds, and of course then there's this air pattern, sort of a standing wave air pattern that that looks like a palm tree. So if you burn pie, green leafy vegetable matter at the base of the CHE and created a smoke pattern, you'd see this massive umbrella-shaped air pattern in the air, if that makes sense. Now, so, and of course, God's spirit is called the Ruach, which is the wind, the moving air. And that air pattern that looks like an umbrella or a palm tree is way, way, way bigger than the CHE. So it is literally established in heaven, if you know what I mean. So in one sense,
I got you.
The CHE is the throne, but it's not the temple. It's because it doesn't contain the air pattern. The CHE is designed to draw the air into it and through it, right?
Right. But this is where your Jason's thesis includes the New Testament. Jacob or Jewish thesis doesn't include New Testament, and so there's a descends from heaven part in the New Testament that may not be in the wording. It may be different in the Old Testament.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Although both the concept of the New Jerusalem is straight from Isaiah. So the theology is that that's a unveiling of Isaiah's vision with a bit more detail.
Okay.
Now, but then the other aspect is that the idea is that God is supposed to dwell within his people, right? And I believe because your body is a temple, your body is a tabernacle, and so Christ referred to himself as the temple and God was basically, my conceptualization is, because you're called to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. So does God live in your heart, in your mind, or in your soul, or does God just occupy your whole body? So that's, one can argue about till the cows come home, and it's really, for this discussion, it doesn't matter. But so the New Jerusalem is, let's say there's 144,000 people living in it. And I'm using that number specifically because it's mentioned in Revelation. And because the New Jerusalem is a 6 out of, this is a factor of 6, so it sort of works in the maths as well. So essentially, God is indwelling. So the people live in the structure, the city, but God lives. So there's the air pattern, which is the ruach, which is if you want, a sign of God's presence. It's, like the clouds are a sign of these pillars of clouds. The cloud isn't God, but it's an indication of his presence, as is this moving air pattern. So you could display the air pattern by, making smoke and saying, oh, look, there it is. So you can feel it, but you can't see it unless you introduce smoke into the air stream. You'd physically be able to see it then, but where God actually dwells is within the hearts, minds, and souls of the people dwelling in the city. And that is not made by human hands. He's dwelling literally, because that description is a New Testament description. Paul saying, do you not know that your body is a temple? And then, of course, Christ saying directly that his body was a temple, the dwelling place of God. So that is New Testament teaching. Whether it is gleaned from the Old Testament or whether it was created out of whole cloth, I don't know. that would be an interesting question to ask Jacob, whether there's a correlation between God dwelling within the human is an Old Testament teaching, or whether it was an invention of the New Testament.
I mean, it seems like God is omnipresent, right? That's the
sure.
hard part. It's like, this whole concept of the temple is like, well, where is God not? Where is
exactly.
God not?
Where is God not? But the point is that in essence, we've got to invite him in, if you know what I mean, by loving him.
I got an answer for where is God not. You keep saying the mind, the soul, the body, the heart, these things in it.
Yeah.
But what's occurred to me is the place where it's not is the mind. The place where God is the heart and the body. So things like pain, that's from God. Like when you feel your feelings, those are from God. Now, how do you interpret those feelings? They're like interpreting dreams. But when you have thoughts and you read about thoughts and ideas, that's where I do not trust that it's from God.
Oh yeah. And no, precisely. So the thoughts that occur to you are either from God or not from God.
Well,
and that's a clear teaching from the New Testament, because 1 minute Peter is speaking God's words, and the next minute Jesus calls him Satan, literally within.
But like we're producing words, and like if there's no audience, and I'm just producing words, it's like maybe they're from God, but those words are received, and then it's like, well, how will they interpret those words? Because in my experience, it's when I try to speak with God, and basically speak for God and be a messenger, it's oftentimes that I know for a fact people don't understand what I'm saying. Right? If I quiz them and try to get them to repeat what I said, they will not. I will know they did not understand what I said, and it's quite obvious because I know what I tried to say and they didn't get it, right?
Yeah.
And so that it's the language, this medium, it just can't even be trusted, because even a messenger, even if scripture is like from God, which I don't necessarily believe it is, I know you do, the receiver, it can't be trusted. The mind can't be trusted to get it.
Yeah, and that's actually part of Jason's thesis.
Right.
It's built there into the biblical logical section, because that is a specific teaching in both the Old and the New Testament. Is hearing they will not perceive, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason, and that's built into that teaching.
It's almost like we should say, hearing we shall not receive. It's like we have to. I think people get into this idea that, oh, those people won't. Those people will hear it and won't understand it, but me, I'll understand it. Everybody gets pretty arrogant.
Yeah. I mean, that's very much that's. I mean, everyone believes they're right. Otherwise, they change their mind, right?
That is the problem. That is the problem. Like that's
of course. Yeah. But that is what the world is going through now, is fragmentation and witnessing the fruits of that. Because I mean, I've grown up in this, well, not even my parents, this a radical individualization of, so you can be whatever you want, and you're your own boss, and be your own true self, find your true self, all this rubbish that Western, or it certainly was the Western religion during my childhood.
Well, can you tell me why it's rubbish? I have ideas for why it's rubbish, but why is it rubbish?
Well, because so you have this the current postmodern understanding, which I agree is correct, is I cannot think without language, right? And language is a interpersonal, is there. Okay. It developed out of a community, so therefore your thinking is community based, it has to be, because the language came from the community. And that's leaving God right out of it, just using logic and the story that we've sort of told ourselves how language has evolved. So you believe what your community believes to a large extent. If you deny your community by only being interested in yourself, you essentially have banished yourself from the community. Or you've banished the community from you, because you're the center of existence and you're the only thing that matters. You're the top of the hierarchy. Whereas if your community, so I'm not talking about, I'm just leaving the divine things at the moment out of the picture, just looking at how people relate to each other. If you have to be bound to your community, and individuation is telling you the opposite. It's saying, chase your own bliss. You can be what you want, do what you want. It'll be cool. And that leads to the death of the community. That community cannot survive that mindset.
I can push back against that one.
Okay. I mean, you just asked me on the spur of the moment, and I gave you a fairly off the cuff response.
Well, if I'm going to push back, I should first say what's good about that. There's wisdom in the community, or at least there should be, especially if it's survived. So we're born into the world naked, babies dependent on others, a community of some sort, things like that. So I think there's definitely a point that you have. Jordan Peterson in Maps of Meaning talks about the archetypal person who goes off into the unknown, faces the dragon, brings back the treasure, transforms the community. So for some, there's got to be some people who are individualistic, who can transform the community towards the good in the face of the unknown. So as times get bad, right, there's got to be some individuation.
Right? Oh yeah, I'm not denying individuation at all. I'm simply saying that because your Jordan Peterson thing, he brought that back to the community to transform the community for the good, right? To raise the community up to the next level or whatever. He was motivated by the well-being of the community. And I'm absolutely not denying that. In fact, that's what that's what I believe. That's what the CAG project is at the center of it. We believe it's the goal that we're trying to reveal that goal to the community, to literally take it into the desert with fresh water and etc.
I guess the issue is with Be Your True Self. I would say the issue with Be Your True Self is when anyone becomes arrogant. And the arrogance is this, I've been defining it recently as capacity to learn and grow, and your ability to be productive towards your goal, whatever your goal is. So now you can actually measure arrogance, and all people are arrogant to some degree. It's not like you're either arrogant or you're not. And that's the point, is that are you your true self or are you not? Is the culture wise or is it not? It's never binary. It's never a binary situation.
And is your true self separate from the community, or is it bound to the community? So I would argue it's the latter. Right, is that you are bound to the community, but you are a intrinsic part, a crucial part of the community. The community is you in a very small aspect. So if you take yourself out of the community by just being a blob in the community and just doing what it's monkey see, monkey do, and not contributing anything new, well, what good are you? Just a robot. You need to be and they talk about a community being like a body. you know, and a body is made up of essential parts, you know, and you need the thumb and the finger, you know, if you cut the finger off, the community is less capable, and it's it.
Well, so we're born naked babies with limited capacity. We grow and we change. And so your role within a community can grow and change. We also get old, our minds deteriorate, we get sick, we have trauma. And so our roles should change. Like, so our roles within a community should be changing, like within the community. Right. So to be your true self would be like, if you were to like steel man that phrase, it would say, well, what's my proper role in the community? And when I go and then I would also ask, well, what's your proper role in the community? And we'd try to, like, if we can figure that out, we'd have peace on earth. I truly believe that.
Yeah, sure. And that's the, if we can figure that out. So
well,
that is
if we're even interested in figuring that out. Like, I don't even think people come into it with an arrogance, right? Which prevents the learning and growing. And that's what prevents us from figuring out our proper role in society.
Look, there's a spirit loose in the world today. And so on this last holiday with my family, my son, who's 27, turning 28. So him and I have quite different worldviews in some respects. And that's normal because I had quite different arrogance. Well, compared to my father, and I then learned about his wisdom every time I bumped my head, and things he told me about. So my son's generation believes that humanity is a plague upon the earth and wrecking it, right?
It's a stereotype, but I get it. It is, there are people like that. Yes.
Yeah. And so, and I to some extent agree with this view. There is truth to this, right? So we went to visit the Kruger National Park, which is roughly 2/3 of the size of the island state of Tasmania, in South Africa. And it's this massive, beautiful park where you can still see, you know, animals largely carrying on as they used to, but there are roads, and they do, you know, they do encounter people in vehicles. But this is a fenced camp, and they fenced it not to protect us from the animals, they fenced it to protect the animals from us. And they have rangers with rifles there protecting the animals from poachers. Because if they hadn't fenced it off, none of those animals would all have been wiped out by us, by humanity. Because, and then you look at two examples, so they're both actually North American examples, which is pretty cool. So if there's land restoration works in place, and trees are brought back into a habitat where there are streams, before long beavers move in and they start building dams, and that then retains water in the landscape and the ecology. The minute the beavers move back, the ecology improves another level up. There's water retention in the land, and the health of the environment grows. Okay, example one. Then example two was the when they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone. It basically the meadows got reestablished, and I watched this, and it was very interesting to watch. But so the spirits governing the animals, I'll put it this way: I'll phrase it like this: the animals are obedient to the spirits that govern them, and the spirits that govern them know how to manage the land. That's one way of phrasing it, right? Whereas we humans are disobedient. We are not we are wrecking the joint. We are not improving it. But I believe that there was a plan all along. So I made this point to my sister.
I'm gonna say one phrase. I'm gonna say, be your true self.
Yeah. So, so there's this
The wolf
iconic
knows how to be your true self, and the
Yeah.
beaver knows how to be your true self. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. But we're kind of lost. We don't know what voices to listen to, right? So, however, so science has shown us by looking at the moon that and doing other investigations is that it would appear that the Earth has been impacted by large rocks from space in the past, and that has had cataclysmic cataclysmic effects on the environment over time, which then over time has healed, right? So you could be a Native American watching this massive asteroid coming in, and although you've now learned to manage the bison sustainably after you wiped out the woolly mammoth, you're saying, okay, we shouldn't do this anymore. We now live in harmony with nature, etc. The asteroid comes in and nature's wrecked for 100,000 years, whatever the case may be, 10,000 years.
The blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye. But then comes the white man comes along, nearly destroys all the bison, almost wipes out the Native Americans, herds them into tribal lands, and and it's cataclysm. You've changed the face of the prairies and of North America in general. But you've now got the potential to possibly do something about incoming asteroids. Maybe not quite yet, maybe in 50 years' time or whatever, but you can see that potential is growing. So that's one example where industrial capacity can protect the Earth from another cataclysm, potentially. But then bring the CHE into the picture. You can now transform the deserts, attract man out of these natural habitats that the wolves and the bison and everything was managing fine without our interference, pull man into the deserts, turn them into gardens, and say, all right, the deserts are for us, and we're going to make something extra special. It's a 1,000-year project for humanity, and nature can fix itself up. And now we can stop global warming, global cooling, and we can now be like beavers, where we are actually enhancing nature rather than destroying it. But we needed industrial capacity in order to achieve that.
So the pushback I received recently is, God is all powerful, and I've encountered this pushback from many people, and it goes something like, God is all powerful, and it is arrogant of you to try to play God and try to prevent the asteroid and to try to deal with global warming or global cooling. And yeah, that's the pushback I get from some people.
Okay, well, fair enough. But God works. God has communicated his will. The God that we're talking about, which is the God that has revealed himself through the scriptures that he inspired us to write. He reveals himself through the consciousness of man, and that God communicates with man. And
the beavers and the wolves.
Yeah. So the beavers and the wolves. So I can't talk to a beaver, right? I don't know what's going on in the beaver's mind, but the beaver knows what to do. It just goes and does it, right? As I said, the beavers are obedient to the spirits that govern them. We lost that at some point, and now the project of the Bible is to make man obey God again.
So I've been trying to be my true self, which means I've been trying to be like the beaver and the wolf. And I imagine that all humans can do that. And then and each human is like, one human might be like a beaver and another one might be like a wolf, right? And so, and what happens is the beaver might say to the wolf is like, you're doing it wrong. And the wolf might say to the beaver, you're doing it wrong. And so that's what I see is people look at me and say, no, you should be doing it the way I'm doing it. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
no, you're doing it the way you're doing it, and that's fine. I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. And
Yep.
it's good, right?
Yep.
And it just so happens I've dreamed of trying to I've been basically, God has informed me to care about clean water for all people on earth. And I just so happened to get connected with Jason Delport, who was given an idea which allows us to have clean water for all people on earth. And so to me, that's a synchronicity, right? It's so then, Jason is being his true self, some kind of like some creature, and I'm being my true self like some creature, and we're doing it. We're seeing the fruit to some degree, but we've got a bigger project. We're not going to see, we're not going to see fruit. It's not the way I'd put it is, I can ask people to help me move my furniture, or I can ask people to help me create peace on earth. There's a big difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the which brings us to that first opening question that you asked me about community and your true self. So a key part of the project you and I are trying to stagger into existence.
We can't ignore it.
Yeah, we can't ignore it. And
God will not allow us to ignore it.
No.
Yeah.
And I mean, as I said multiple times to you, you've got a full-time job, I've got a full-time job, and we're doing this in our spare time. And I don't have a lot of one has demands in your spare time. You've got a young family, and yet here we are. We somewhat compelled to do this, and I think we've proven this with the inordinate amount of time we've devoted to speaking to each other over a couple of years.
And then people will say, well, what's the fruit? Like a lot of people, we might look like some beaver, and someone else, might be a goat or a sheep, and they look at us and say, what the hell are you doing? There's no fruit, right?
Correct, because but it takes a while for the tree to grow before it can produce the fruit, which is where we're at. But the interesting thing about the CHE is you cannot do this without a big community effort, right? So we are pitching this to build a community of people to bring this into being, because without that buy-in from others, there will be no fruit.
You need a team of thousands to do this one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So that is and people are saying, oh, you've got to take it out of the virtual world into the real world. Yeah, well, that's what we're dreaming about doing. We're trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
When it says first, you have to get people onto the same message and page, and the internet is the perfect vehicle for that.
When the things descend from heaven, how does that happen? Is it a spaceship, or is it the you receive
pattern. Pure pattern?
Yeah. But are you receiving information from a spiritual realm? Such that you can go do, so that you for me, it's it's all coming from the spiritual realm. Like the whole world, and we talked about it, the whole world is coming from powers and principalities, the spiritual realm. And and I like to look at the goals, right? Because that's your intention. Because some goals, you have 5-year goals, 10-year goals, 100-year goals, right? And for the people who are only looking at tomorrow or next week, from their perspective, if you're looking 100 years in the future, then they think you're wasting your time. And It's like, so that's the reason I think I get disregarded or ignored or ridiculed for some of the things I say.
Yeah, well, so just read Revelation 16:19. Sorry, you were talking about powers and principalities, and that just it's a verse that I hadn't seen before.
Would you like me to read it?
Yep.
All right, just 10 seconds. You said Revelation
16 verse 19.
16:19. And for the people who are concerned, we're doing Bible study. I mean, we are doing Bible study. That's
oh, yeah. Once I see Jason's thesis, it's beyond. It's all.
You are doing the Bible study, and I'm kind of like just clinging on to some coattails, just trying to be of service and be a helper, because that's my whole stick. Is my religion is tool making, and I'm a tool maker, and I'm trying to make sure that good people are aware of the tools that are available and trying to are using them, because that's who I am, and that's my true self, is that I am a tool maker. But Revelation 16:19, and the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath.
Okay, so the principalities are the spirits ruling the cities. So there's this image of the Great Babylon, which I think I've explained to you, is all the cities of the nations. It's the pattern of the cities of the nations, which the current pattern is ubiquitous. It's cities built around commerce and trade. That is the religion of this world, and the CBD is the temple area of the cities.
Central Business District.
Yep. And the Central Business District is based on the Babylon pattern, a tower erected to glorify the name of the tower. And because God confused their languages, the CBD isn't one tower, it is multiple towers, each glorifying their own name. All right, so that's
worshiping Mammon.
Yep, that's the pattern of Babylon. This structure, the purpose of the CHE is to destroy that pattern and offer a new pattern. How's that for a big claim? That is the purpose of the CHE. The CHE is the new pattern for the new city, and the last CHE to be built will be built in Jerusalem in 1,000 years' time. But
I like
the first CHE is going to be, it's up to us to get the first one built.
And that's the part that's always confusing. Is it really up to us, or is it up to God, or is it up to a large group, a community, or who is it up to?
God works through the community.
I mean, I think we kind of agree with this idea. I've been restating these ideas, trying to have more clarity and resolution, is that we're a part of a story. The creator has already written the story. Like that, when people say God is all powerful, it's like, well, do we live in a story that has already been written? Right? Because if that's the case, then, it's more a matter of us figuring out, we're just being our true self in the story. Right.
Yep.
And so, it's not, I don't even know where I was going with it, but it's almost like the free will aspect of it. There's a playing out, and there's a question of the quest ion is, what is my role in the story, and what is the story? And so is the story that all of the cities who worship money and mammon and do idolatry are going to be basically repossessed into a new spirit, right? Or the spirit was money, which was good, because with tool making, you actually love your enemy. Your enemy can use your tools. And so the enemy and Satan has allowed for these tools to emerge, but once people actually focus on God, the tools are in place, the infrastructure is built, the knowledge is there. That's the way I see it. The CHE is a technology based on knowledge, and physics, which requires humans to create it, just like all the miracle. Like right now, this is a miracle. Us talking to each other and the audience listening to it is a miracle, which required, which came from the heavens and was created with human hands. So that's the whole part about when Jacob says it's not created with human hands, it's confusing to me. I actually went and asked in his Torah channel with the rabbis for the part, because I don't see the things that are created without human hands. Maybe it's the mountains and the sun. There are things like that. Humans aren't necessarily created with human hands. It's more with private parts. But
yeah. Well,
what does it mean?
No, we didn't create ourselves. So
we participated in it with our private parts.
Yep.
Our genitalia.
But we didn't create ourselves. So that, that's certainly, oh man, I saw a video which I seem to have lost. I'll find it in my history.
I'll just read Revelation 16:19 one more time while you keep searching. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon, capital B, Babylon, came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath.
Yep. So I found this.
The fierceness of his wrath sounds scary to some people. I guess that's why I moved from a big city to a smaller city and moved to a rural area, because I see a setup where all the people in these high population density areas they're just ripe for misery. Because it's the systems are so interconnected. This is what I do is I understand systems. I'm a site reliability engineer of complex systems, and I understand the risks and how you de-risk. And if you live in these cities that we have today, you are just playing with a nuclear bomb. It's just ready to go off, and it's not a real nuclear bomb. It's just, and COVID kind of shows you what could happen. But as Chad the alcoholic says, you could just have an electromagnetic pulse get burped out by the sun, boom. There's no telling what could happen, and that's why I'm growing fruit trees.
It's not even that. You have one event. Who's that guy that couldn't breathe? The black guy that got killed by the cops or died in their custody.
Was his name Eric? I don't remember.
Anyway, that led to not just national protests and riots, but international events, right? And it's fled through the world city. It's spread through the world cities in hours and 1 or 2 days. It's happened 3 years ago. The guy who was,
I could find it.
Yeah. And everyone was all the FBI and everyone was kneeling. It was Black Lives Matter, that sort of initiated that whole thing. Anyway, so
they were the last words of Eric Garner, "I can't breathe," an unarmed man who was killed in 2014.
Okay, no, so it's not him.
Not him.
It's now 2019, 2021.
There's been a few of them where basically the sorcerers are able to put out the information in order to get thoughts and ideas to motivate the spirit in certain directions to cause large amounts of people to respond.
Yep.
The sorcerers are powerful. And I mean, we actually could talk about the justice system and law enforcement and government. I actually have ideas and answers to these. And I know there's tons of people who will think that I'm wrong and they know the answer, but I would just point back to arrogance and who's the most arrogant people in the world. And we can actually measure and identify people who are best able to learn. So we could solve these problems, but you got too much arrogance, too much arrogance.
So the name I was looking for was George Floyd.
There you go.
So, those George Floyd riots, and, there were the Rodney King riots in LA back in the 80s or 90s, or whenever it was. These events are potentially more cataclysmic than, the natural things we fear about in big cities.
I don't know about that. That earthquake, man. That earthquake. And
I'm not.
It makes me mad at God whenever things like that happen. Like, asteroid coming down, earthquake. Ooh.
Sure.
I do think that we have a story where we will resurrect the dead. So that's what gives me a little bit of a comfort. That story that I tell myself.
Yep. But So I'm not discounting natural disasters. I'm just saying that World War II was devastating. These riots that can sweep through cities. South Africa was almost disabled in one day by political riots, where they went and almost destroyed the critical infrastructure because there's one main corridor for.
It's arrogance. I mean, it's arrogance is the root cause.
Totally. That was instigated as a purely political act. And there are forces capable of doing that, and there are people willing to obey those forces. So those are also factors to be considered in big cities.
I don't even think it's obey. Like, obey means there was a request or an invitation and people say, okay, I'll obey. It's more like becoming possessed by a spirit where you don't even realize that you are obeyed. Like like there was no consent. It just kind of happens without control.
Sure. It's you're obeying spirits. These are principalities and powers. Cities are principalities by definition. And that's the Bible gives many. So these cities that Revelation 16:19, that is the destruction of the principalities. Humans are collateral damage, but we can be resurrected. The point is to destroy the cities, the principalities, the governing spirits. That is the war. Will humans, is there suffering in the process? Absolutely. But the humans aren't the target. The intention is to free us from these principalities. This is a war for our freedom.
I mean, the story plays out throughout history where, because the community and the individuals in the community aren't figuring out the proper role for themselves and everyone around them, so that you actually serve God, right?
Sure, because most
people who believe, I would say almost 100% of the people who believe they're serving God actually aren't serving God. Like, it's not happening. And what happens is you end up, things get worse, and there's pain and suffering being received. So until, and it will continue to, the pain and suffering continues to grow until people start to wisen up and say, well, we need to change something, right?
Yeah. But of course, what no one currently knows. So I heard, this is a blog that I used to frequent, and I'm going to, as soon as this website's in some semblance of being able to be understood, coherent, if it meets a minimum standard of coherency, I'm going to go back to this blog. Last time I interacted there was 6 months ago, and I told them I'd be coming back with the which is, I didn't think it would take 6 months. But the question was, so this guy, his screen name was Scott. So Scott said, it's simple. All we got to do is figure out what God wants and then do that. And that was a very concise way of describing what Christians have been claiming. Yeah, but it's so clearly and concisely describe what it is we're supposed to do. But of course, no one will agree as to what that is, right?
It's not that simple.
No, but it's a beautiful little sentence, and then you say, okay, so how do we figure that out? It's not that
right,
simple.
right.
So I'm in agreement with that. And this project is to reorient humanity and say, this now decodes the Bible so that you can understand what the next 1,000 years is all about. That's Jason. That is the purpose of the thesis that I'm going to give you something over the next 3 days. We've got a 3-day weekend, and I've got Appendix 1 written. Appendix 2 is almost done. And then there is now enough for someone to read this and go, huh, I believe. But of course, yeah, so we're at the point where I can publish something where it's going to, but this is probably going to mull in amongst small people, so maybe Grim Grizz, and maybe we can Chad, and maybe Sam. I'd like Sam of Transfiguration to get involved at some point in the near future, because this thing is this is Jason's pathetic writing. It needs to be sharpened in terms of persuasion, just cleaning up sentences.
Yeah.
But there's enough there now that is undeniable. The pattern matching is undeniable.
And Sam is very sharp.
Yeah. Everything I've seen with Sam, is earned my respect. So it'll be interesting to see what his take is. And Sam was interested in Peter's statement at the Transfiguration. I have an answer for Sam, and that was, let me build 3 tabernacles. And Paul's last sermon dealt with that. And Paul is giving the stock standard answer, is that Peter's an idiot and didn't know what he was talking about. But there's a mystery there, and all 3 synoptic gospels mention this statement of Peter's. It's there for a reason, and there's a very clear and simple answer, but it's not obvious. It's not obvious until it's shown to people.
And then so I have to throw my spin on it. So like, there's people who see a day in the future or a week in the future. Like, those people can be their true self and looks like a certain animal doing good in the world. And then there's people who are looking, 100 years into the future and have more vision. And if there is arrogance, then either creature can look at the other and say, you're doing it wrong, right? And what happens though is that the creature there's creatures with limited vision will just have faith. And so what I would say is, like, I think at some point, so you have a vision that's quite larger than most people. And I would say my vision is larger. And the indicator would be that at some point you believe that there will be the hands of God that will actually intervene. That does not require the hands of humans. Like, there will be a miracle at some point.
So the miracle I'm envisaging is that, the fact that I'm sitting here talking about the CHE, in my opinion, is a miracle.
Yeah, the fact that we're using this technology, I say, like, internet is a miracle.
Yeah, sure. But so the next miracle that I perceive is that we will find the community to progress the CHE. Right, so you and I have been doing this now for some time, and so far our group hasn't grown beyond the core team, and the rest of them are sitting there waiting for you and I to do something constructive so they can re-engage. So it's really been you and it's been the two of us, right? For quite some time.
And then the question is why? Right.
Well, yeah. So why are we spending all our spare time?
Well, not just that, but why aren't there other people here?
Oh, because there's not a coherent message yet.
So, well, and that's where I have a teaching. There's a reason I'm here and no one else is here, is because, and I have something to teach that other people don't know. Or maybe there's no, like, that's my claim. I do have there is a way to actually listen to God and obey God and find yourself here. That's
yeah. I mean, I can't tell you why you're here. You might, and I do not understand myself consciously, if you know what I mean, because your conscious mind literally cannot encapsulate your subconscious. You're only seeing slices of your own self at any given time.
We can interpret our subconscious, right?
Sure. But literally your subconscious is all of you, and your conscious mind can only deal with and manipulate and see a small part of yourself at any given time.
Right. But what happens is we become arrogant. So we experience something like stress or anxiety or pain or hate or anger. We experience these things. These are fruits. Those are messages from God. And then our conscious mind, it's limited, can attempt to interpret it. And then the arrogance is that we settle on an interpretation. So for example, if my words cause an emotion to arise, and then your mind has an interpretation of it and stops, right? That means there's an arrogance. There's not a willingness to seek out a better interpretation of the emotions that arise from God, sure. Right? And it's the same way with dreams. So this subconscious mind is connected to God, and we try to figure it out. And there's a muscle there. There's a skill, and being able to, it's called God's messengers, right? God has messengers, and these are just people who have developed a skill and a muscle in being able to communicate with God via this instrument we've all been given. We've all been given an instrument. Some people have learned how to play it better than others. And so the reason I'm here is because I'm pretty good at playing my instrument. That's what my claim. The reason you're here is because you're pretty good at playing your instrument. And I think a lot of people are doing that, but we have to be careful of our arrogance. So that's an invitation for someone to come to me and say, you're wrong, Gavin. And then I have to say, okay, I might be wrong. Let me hear your reasons. Let me hear your story.
Well, we've put, although we intend to put $500 each to remunerate someone to demonstrate how wrong we are. Isn't that so?
Right.
So we literally will be inviting people, and we'll pay them if they can demonstrate that we're wrong, so that we can be freed from this delusion that is keeping us bound to talking to each other once a week for years, to progress a common vision, right? Which we so far believe.
When there's a question of why aren't people here, there's also a question of, what am I doing wrong to make this better? How can I be a better leader? And then it's like, well, should we create the thing that makes it easier for people to participate in the challenge, the $1,000 prize, which could even be a growing prize. And then there's a question of what's the right time and right order? When should that challenge be integrated with better technology in order to make sure it can handle scale? Because there's always scaling problems. So there's always a question of, should I be working on my boat motor or my camera or my fruit trees, or being a husband, a father, or paying attention to my uncle? It's like, there's a
there's a hierarchy of attention that you need to attend to, and you need to attend to all of those things in the appropriate
And so
order
I try to listen to God. I
yeah.
try to listen to God. That's what I do.
Well, and those if you are neglecting a specific aspect, guess what? Your conscience speaks to you. That's God telling you to hey,
Yeah.
Gavin, you've forgotten about so and so, and what are you doing about it, Gavin?
Husband and father is way up there on the list.
Yeah. So this inner compulsion is God working through you. So the I just call our subconscious a portal into heaven.
Right.
But there are two heavens. There's the realm of the air and there's the highest heaven, and we are open to both. And we're primarily guided by the lower heaven, which is the realm of the air. And I think I try to demonstrate to you that all the information that enters our noggins comes through the air in terms of, in terms of sound and light and whatever else.
Well, I call it a physical heaven and a spiritual heaven. It's the difference between the spaceship descending as a temple versus the ideas and the plans for the temple descending through the minds of humans and who create it. Like the spiritual heaven is connected to our minds and our subconscious and all of our ancestors and everything at this right. And the physical heaven is that, we're breathing in plant waste. That's the physical heaven, is with all these plants, and it's amazing. This physical heaven is amazing as well.
And to some extent, I regard as the internet as according to the pattern of heaven. It's sort of because we are here as immaterial virtual beings communicating with each other. Heaven is a communicative place. It's about patterns. The internet is about transmitting patterns. So there's
the embodiment. The embodiment, and the embodiment's not binary. There's degrees of embodiment, and so you and I right now, we can receive feedback, and there's a capacity for embodiment. And so when someone listens to this in 100 years, it's a little bit different capacity for embodiment.
Yeah, but to my mind, the internet is if you want, a more physicalized version of heaven, if that makes sense. It's less subtle. It's very much in your face, but it follows that pattern.
We could speak to the people 100 years from now instead of the people for 2 hours from now.
Yep.
No.
So just to get back to when I think our first version, version 1.0 of this, when the website goes into some semblance of liveness, must already make mention of the $1,000 competition. There must be a section referencing it. Just so that we're open and upfront about our intentions. So I haven't included anything I've typed up, but that can be built in just as a section to be developed down the track, but stating our intentions up front. Because all right, you're about to hit your walking time soon, I think.
The weather has been bad. I'm not sure. Sometimes we go out and walk in bad weather, but what is bad weather? It's different. It's bad weather is just these words that mean something different in every mind.
I mean, it's bad for some things, but good for other things, right?
I wouldn't want to freeze to death. That would.
That would be bad. Cold conditions are essential for certain processes in nature to occur as well. So it's good for those, and not so good for Gavin wanting to go for an exercise stroll when the conditions aren't conducive to that.
It depends on your creature.
Yep. Exactly. So the So I'm going to send you a raft of stuff over the next couple of days, including PDFs, and then you can just look at them when you have time or not, or we can scan through them next week. But I want to start, actually delivering a bunch of stuff, and then you can tell me what is clearly inadequate and what needs further work. That's fine. But I'm just feeling like if I don't start handing over things for feedback, I'm going to go mad. So I'm going to start offloading stuff onto you, and I'll be spreading it around through my personal network as well for feedback. So, but I feel like we're now at the point where I can point to actual fruit, and that fruit just now needs to be presented better. We need some better packaging for the fruit, and some shining of the apples, and giving it a nice container with fluffy paper and all of that, so that it looks appealing. But yeah, I have become more and more sure going through this process, especially because what I've recently really been honing on is this powers and principalities business. That's what it's all about. The wrath is all aimed at the powers and principalities. Will there be human suffering in the process? It's unavoidable.
You said the rough is all about
the wrath of God. Sorry,
the wrath.
Yeah,
I got you.
Sorry. Earlier I was looking for a video which I found. I'll give you the so if you search in YouTube, it's the channel's name is Tomorrow's Build, and if you just go billionaire building $400 billion city in US desert, something along those lines.
What's the name of the channel?
Tomorrow's Build, BUILD, in case we're having accent issues. You can maybe share screen and just play the first little intro bit.
Okay. Let's see.
It's pretty cool because it's very pertinent to the days, as in the days of Noah, there were marriages and eating and drinking going on, and the eating and drinking and marriages were that of principalities and powers. And here's a principality that is waiting for a wedding.
All right. Do you see it?
Yep.
All right. I'm just going to make sure I'm at the beginning.
By now, we're guessing you've probably heard of Saudi Arabia's The Line, and perhaps even South Korea's Floating City. But what about Tolosa? It's yet another futuristic city planned to be built from scratch. This time it'll be set somewhere in the middle of a US desert and cost a staggering $400 billion to complete. Tolosa's blueprint is all about sustainability and an economic system called equitism. And it's been proposed by this guy, billionaire entrepreneur Mark Lowry, a former Walmart executive and founder of Jet.com and Diapers.com. Yep, you heard that right.
So I thought, well, what if we created a Tolosa Community Foundation and we went out and acquired hundreds of thousands of acres of worthless land and were able to build a city.
The city's being designed by a world-famous architect and aims to be home to 50,000 people by the year 2030 before going on to grow to a population of 5 million. So how will an entire sustainable city be built in the middle of the desert? What exactly is equitism? And why is a billionaire, of all people, proposing the city of the future?
Is that the part? You want to keep going?
No, that's fine. I think you should watch this when you're so inclined.
Yeah.
So there's a section where a lady discusses the problems of the city, which is water is the one that they actually haven't addressed, which is key. There was a second issue which I can't remember now. Energy. I think it's water and energy, and then the third one is the purpose of the city, which is so they have a spiritual purpose for the city, which they call equitism, which is just another, right? So the CHE, what's fascinating is that so this guy is clearly, so he's paid an architect to develop a vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's shelled out probably $1 million, or whatever the case may be, or several hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a concept developed. And they've got this vision around equitism, which is the spiritual purpose of the city. So you should watch that, because intriguingly, you and I have spent less man hours than they have done, but we've come up with water, energy, transforming a desert, and the third criteria, the final criteria, which you cannot build any city without, is the purpose of the city, the spirit of the city, what is going to animate the city, and that is what we're working on right now.
The when you say we and all that, I don't.
Well,
I understand. You don't want to sound arrogant, but all I'm doing is I feel a purpose and meaning in taking the knowledge and the dreams and visions I've had and being here to be of service and be helpful.
Sure.
Trying to be my own creature, a beaver or something.
So when I say we is I can't do a thing without you, and you and I can't do a thing without those thousands of people that we have to recruit.
Right.
So the we is currently 2 of us, and then there's a.
But the we is also like your ancestors and my ancestors and it goes all the way back.
And our descendants are going to have to complete the same.
Right. And
continue. Yeah.
And I keep reminding you that it might not be completed in our lifetime. So
I accept that.
Hopefully not. Jacob sounds excited. He thinks that we're in the end times. Gringos thinks we're in the end times. Everybody, but people have been thinking they're in the end times since the beginning or whatever.
Sure. Now I know that we're in the end times.
Well, I mean, what does it mean? Aren't we? I mean, the spirit of the person from 1,000 years ago is still can have some influence, right? It's like it's there in the genes and in the culture and.
But the final image, which I haven't typed up yet, which I've mentioned this to you before. So there's this Matthew 24 thing, which ties into very much Isaiah. God says, "I will raise a banner that will call his people towards him." That banner is this. So that when so in the English translation, "I will raise a banner," but in the Hebrew, it is a sign. I will raise a sign on the mountains. And in the Greek Bible, in the New Testament, that same sign is the sign of the Son of Man. And the Son of Man is an Old Testament concept from Daniel, right?
I'm not an expert at the Bible.
So this concept of the Son of Man is a concept that is born in Daniel. And Jesus then uses this terminology to describe himself. So the sign of the Son of Man, and then there's visual descriptions of the Son of Man, the appearance of the Son of Man, and what the purpose of one of the purposes of Jason's thesis is to demonstrate that the CHE is that sign. It is that our purpose is to erect a sign. The CHE in one instance is literally a sign, sending a message.
How is it connected to the Son of Man? Do you know that? Do you have that figured out?
Yeah, I've got that figured out.
Okay, it'll be in the thesis.
I've just got to type it up.
Okay.
So this is literally the banner and the sign of the Son of Man, the same thing. So I'm making that claim, and that's somebody like Sam. I want him to interrogate me to try and prove me wrong.
Yeah. I do wonder how much, like, you see it in the Christian Bible. I wonder if Jews will see it in the Old Testament, and I wonder if, like, how many people and religions and faiths can see the sign.
Okay. So Jesus sent his disciples out, and he said, "I need you to make disciples of all the nations." And one of the conditions for before the end could come was that the Bible had to be spread to every nation on the planet.
So you say, so like when the church has a mission of teaching about Jesus, that's important. That's been an important part of our story.
It has been essential. So even as flawed as we might want to call the Protestant church or the Catholic, all this internecine fighting, what they have all done is maintained a presence for the Bible where they are, and they've spread it.
Yeah.
And that was the evangelical mission.
That's what I think the Jews, some Jews at least, Jacob believes as well, is like Christianity and Islam. They are from God and will ultimately point back at Judaism, and there will be a Messiah.
Well, Christianity absolutely points back at Judaism.
Right.
Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, and he will rule from Jerusalem, and all of Israel will be saved. The Jews will become back into right relationship with God. That is a Christian belief.
Yeah. So I had a recent video. I don't know if you called it. I have 2 YouTube channels, but I said, what's wrong with people raising their hand and saying, I might be the Messiah, right? And I would like to essentially encourage this behavior. And I think like Jacob encourages this behavior as well. Is like, we should all aspire to be the Messiah. Like, that means we're aiming at trying to become the kind of person who can lead others toward peace on earth, for example. That's one way of saying it.
Okay, so I'll give you my interpretation of that. So because I accept through my own personal experiences, and so I believe Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, and that he's ascended, he will rule on the right hand of God. You won't see human eyes of flesh. Jesus has come in the flesh, and he's that phase of his existence has passed. I'm not saying no one else will see him in his glorified body. I've not seen Christ in his glorified body. These CHEs is the proof of God's existence. It's the sign, which is the point. But so when you say people should put up their hands to be the Messiah, so my interpretation of that is that if you believe, so in my case, I'm saying I'm putting my hand up as a servant of the Messiah. I'm not him.
Yeah.
I'm a servant.
Well, I know I'm not the Messiah, right? But then the question I have is, could I ever become the Messiah? Right. And so if you're a Christian, you say, Gavin can't become the Messiah because Jesus is the Messiah. Whereas for me, I say, do you not believe that God could train me to become the Messiah? And what's wrong with me asking God and trying to submit to God and say, I am willing to be the Messiah if you need me to be the Messiah, but I'll be whatever you need me to be. I'll play the position, whatever role you need me to play, I'll do it, up to and including Messiah, because I don't see anyone else doing it, right? And part of the reason nobody else is doing it because they believe that Jesus is the Messiah, so they don't even try.
Okay. So under that doctrine, because there's this so Jesus is the King of Kings. So remember, what's happening is that all the cities of Babylon, the cities of the world are going to be destroyed because they are the principalities currently ruling the world. And then there's a concept of the King of Kings. Jesus and God will sit in Jerusalem and rule that from there. But every single city that is going to be destroyed, there will be a replacement principalities and powers. There will be new kings, new anointed kings. So the Messiah has come to rule with many other anointed kings. So can you be a Messiah? Yes, you can.
So the part about God and Jesus in Jerusalem, like if I to just try to match that up with my worldview, which I am perfectly willing to try to clarify and improve over time, I would like, for me, God is omnipresent, is everywhere. Humans, they're like temples. It's an instrument, and we can learn to play our instrument to be messengers of God. And so the Messiah would be the best messenger of God sitting in New Jerusalem. And if you want to know God because you know you need to work on your instrument, or you want some guidance, what better place to go is to the person who has learned to play their instrument better than everyone else. And like I said, I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm saying I would like to try to be as good as I can possibly be. I want to encourage everyone to do that. And I even have techniques and experiments which I could run to help identify those who would be better than me, right? And I could point at them. But we're not even willing to run those experiments because of people's belief systems, right?
Sure,
So
because of the current principalities and powers that are ruling the world, which I believe are about to come crashing down in the very near future.
Well, I have the response. People, when I say things like that, people think I'm saying me. And they think they hear arrogance, and it's just so troubling because, you know, I would prefer not to be the Messiah. By me saying I'm trying and I'm aiming and I'm willing to do it if God wants me to do it, it's like that would not be my top pick, right? If I get to actually pick what role I want, I would actually be unnoticed. Nobody would see me, and I would be a servant that nobody would see. But like, I'm considering the possibility there has to be someone that's actually sitting, in the New Jerusalem, and it's like who's got the cojones and the balls? And it's like we need to stop condescending toward people who want to be of most service to humanity and everything, and to serve God better than as best as possible. Like we really should not be looking down on people who do that.
Yeah, so look, so what you described, there's a pattern. So the pattern up until now and continuing is that the pattern is I've got an idea, I amass a certain amount of money and people to work with me and then I go and build a tower in the CBD, and we become powerful so that we can effect that vision in the world, right? So that's the old pattern. Glorify the idol that we are, holding up as the purpose of this entity. So the pattern of God is to glorify His name and enact His will in humility, and He will bless you like you can't believe.
Right.
And if you do it right, you will become a king of one or many cities and possibly a nation. But that is once you are exalted and you are no longer in the skin suit, you're in a glorified body.
I don't think we get there unless we figure out our proper roles. Like when I talk about, being your true self,
how you live in this world matters. I'm not denying. I'm absolutely what you do now matters and has a bearing on your future service and future calling.
and there are people who are teachers, right? And so that's the hard part for me, is like, it seems that I have something to teach, but there's no students.
Sure.
But I mean, I have my wife and my children, and I'm trying my best there, and I'm learning. And actually, my wife's a very good teacher, and so I learn a lot from my children and my wife. But
yeah. So I mean, your time will come when it comes, is the way I see it.
It just feels it doesn't feel good to be ignored and disregarded and ridiculed and laughed at and things like that.
Well, Gavin, I mean, you've generously offered to put up $500 of your own money on the CHE, because you can't find the floor. I thought it was a great idea, and you inspired me to pony up $500 of my money, and I believe we're going to have people trying to take that money away from us in the very near future. And if we are able to hold on to our money, we are going to change the world.
Yeah, it might have to be enough money to get the people who have the credentials to.
Yeah, I think the money is just a token. The money is purely a sign of our good faith and intent. The size of it should be irrelevant, because the claims that we're making, no amount of money, if we are right, then the money is immaterial.
So here's the issue, though, is that people are not serving God, right? They're motivated by a different spirit, and so
yeah, but that's
if the prize gets big enough, they would actually get motivated by the spirit of mammon.
No. So I believe that the spirit will bring the team to us. We've got to do the bare. It's like, if you want to win the lottery, you're not going to win it without buying a ticket. If we want to find a team, we have to put the minimum work in place to give the spirit a chance to send the algorithm their way, so that they can find our website and find us, to put us. So we have to do that basic legwork, and then we will talk. We'll reach out, and then the word will spread.
I guess my question, I just don't know how many people are actually, how many people believe they have been saved and are working for Jesus and the Holy Spirit and God, but really aren't, and are deluded. Sure. That's my concern, is that most people are like that. It's like, that's my concern.
Well, so, and all I can do is use my own example, is that I was an atheist. I was angry with God. I wanted nothing to do with him. Then I was an agnostic, which was even worse. I just ignored it because it was impossible.
It's a necessary step, I think.
Sure. And there I was, and here I am today. So, and what changed is just stuff inside my head. I was transformed from within by revelations.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm such a poor communicator that if this relies on my ability to sell this, I have zero faith. But I have faith that which happened to me will bring the people to us. And if it doesn't happen, then I'm deluded in what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's where I could remember that we're in a story that's already been written.
Yeah,
that's where if if I can remember that, and then you've got the whole free will topic. But yeah, sure. I guess the thing I struggle with is, do I believe there is free will or not? That's what I'm still agnostic on that. Obviously, if I get stressed at all about, because that's what I notice, there's a stress, and then it's like, okay, yeah, the stress is because I truly don't have faith that we're part of the story that's already been written, and that I trust God. Like, that's where my stress comes
and that's
from.
A very rational and I have my dark nights of the soul where those doubts creep in. Now, just
because it's dangerous. You do see people go and murder children because they're so confident and have so much arrogance and that's the thing about like, you will have the stress emerge because of a lack of confidence, a lack of arrogance.
So there was an American TV show, which I didn't watch, but my wife watched it. And I think it was called Russians or something. And the concept was that there were these, there was a school in Russia where they built a little America, and these kids were raised and taught in American accents and school. And then these families were shipped over and implanted. And these kids were sort of hypnotized and brainwashed. And then once they hit, their early 20s or whatever, they were activated to become active spies. And I gave my sister this thing. She loved it because she totally resonated with this idea, is that once you get the code word to activate you, you become transformed, and you suddenly find your new mission. And that's what is the best description I can give of what happened to me. Is the CHE was the pattern which woke me up.
Yeah.
But it was in its infancy. I was just swept along by a series of events which I could not follow, if you know what I mean. I've given you that. And right. I think that I believe, as you said so eloquently just now, when a story has already been written, and that there are other actors in that story who will discover that they're in that story.
Right. That makes sense to me. That's how I see God working, is this code word stuff. Yeah, I think Rimgro's asked, he wanted to know, what's the fruit of my experience where I was able to see into the future? And it's like, well, the only fruit I know of, like everything I am now is connected to it. That's one answer, which I don't think anyone would like, but it changed my worldview. I then became someone who realized, we can tap into the story that hasn't even happened yet in our experience of time. And so that's what allows me to have I actually have the evidence that we could be in a story that's already been written, right? So that's, so that's that's the big thing that changed when I had that experience, was my worldview. And I guess I just need to remember it. And by remembering it, which is hard because humans forget things all the time.
But and that's not our day-to-day experience, right? In this world, because we're getting bombarded with counter stories all the time. So if you can adopt that mindset when you read this, is to say, all right, so the claim from Jason is that the CHE is a revelation of the story that's already been written. How can we present that in the most persuasive, clear, concise way? So that's ultimately what the next phase is that we're trying to bring into bear.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, that's where the miracles can happen, is with when you all of a sudden receive the code word. Code word for me is a metaphor for an experience, and the experience. One of those, I've had a handful of them, but one of them was seeing into the future. Another one, I met demons one time. It's that I wasn't even in a dream when I met demons, or I wasn't impacted by any mind-altering substances or anything. So it's like I've had experiences that are like code words that then are revelations, right? That's really what it is. It's a code word is a personal revelation.
Epiphany is another word, I think.
Yeah, epiphany.
And I've had very few and isolated. I think I mentioned this in the past, as sort of a demonic experience. I've had one that I'll never forget. I may have had others which I brushed off, but this one I've never forgotten, and it was a real presence, or it felt as real as anything. And I was paralyzed in a half awake state, and it was just,
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
yeah.
I had one of those last night, actually. It just, what was noteworthy of it last night is so in a previous encounter, I was scared, but in my encounter last night, I had no fear, and I was like, bring it on. And they tried, like there's a pressure and heaviness and that precedes, this encounter with some demon. And I was just like, I'm not scared. Bring it on. Like, I'm not scared of demons. So I thought that was interesting that that I had fear of demons years ago, but at this point, I didn't have fear of demons.
Yep.
I actually think, I wonder sometimes if you get tested, and so you maybe that, like, if you're a leader, you would want to make sure that you're either testing or I really think you should be testing in order to see if people are able to carry the load before you overload them and overwhelm them.
Well, there's this notion of many are called but few are chosen. So there's that concept, and then there's the other idea is whatever is happening here on earth is a reflection of patterns in heaven. So we have this notion of universities graduating exams or military training selection, and then special forces selection, all of those. So what is so selection is a clear pattern, right? Testing and selection. That's undeniable, a pattern through all animal.
When
that's a basic pattern is testing and selection. So yes, you are being tested.
And then there's also the gardening side, the cultivation. Early at the very beginning, we were talking about I'd asked you, what do you mean about how you're kind of opposition to the phrase be your true self, and some of the first things you had said was like, we use this language, and I wanted to intervene at that time, but so when I met Jesus twice, what occurred to me recently that I never really noticed before is Jesus never said anything to me. There was no language. And so, because you had said people think with language, and you can have these encounters where there is no language, like the dream I had last night.
There's just knowing, you just know, right?
Where it's like, well, you are in a encounter, an experience, as if you're in the real world. And there can even be silence, and people are just doing. And so, but the second time I met Jesus, he was in a garden, and it's like that's a good pattern, is the cultivation. So it's not just, you don't want to just be testing and selecting, you also want to be cultivating as well. And so
there's a time for everything under the sun. You're selected for a purpose.
Yeah, I guess what Jesus said is there's the weeds will grow. You don't want to pull out the weeds or else you ruin the crop. And so you wait until harvest time, right? So,
Yep.
All right.
So all right.
Well, I'm gonna end it pretty soon.
Yeah. It's midnight here, so I should probably abide by that thing and agree with you. Let's call it. All right, Gavin, that was good.
Yep. And I'm going to share it. I think sometimes when we talk like this, it's different when it's just you and me, and it's different if there's an idea that it could be shared. So sometimes when I say you, I don't mean you, right? And I think you are doing the same thing. Sometimes we actually mean the audience, which ideally we can say things that are relevant for people that aren't even born yet. But if you can really be a messenger, but
yeah, sure. Look, and it might be, I'm not going to suggest you when to post stuff because I don't know anything. I have no skill in that area, but it might be, like this talk might be more interesting to people if once the website goes live. Okay. You could repost it then, and say, because then they'll have some framework for what we're talking about. Or you can repost it then with a bit of an intro and say, here, go to the website, check it out, and then watch this video, because this is what we're sort of talking about in broad strokes. might then
I
have
mean-
more value to some people.
Yeah, there could also be, yeah, I put these in a Google Drive, so I could post it on my YouTube channel for like the benefit of the 37 subscribers I have,
Yeah.
including some family members, where I have mentioned the CHE and I have mentioned Jason. And then also, when the website's live, we could also use Vimeo or a new YouTube channel to also, and then even edit this or put it whole into the right spot. So I don't know if it's, I don't know if you feel that this should not be shared now, then I won't share it
I
now,
no
but-
longer have those sorts of issues of his. So
Okay.
you do with whatever feels right to you.
Yeah, I don't feel any anxiety about sharing these. I'm
Yeah.
trying to, like, I want people to have more, I want people to be able to understand me. That's really the thing that, I was talking to Kira, and it was a conversation around the book Nonviolent Communication, and she had expressed it after I'd said something. She said, "It sounds like you just want to be understood." Right. And so that's really what I'm doing is trying to be understood. Right. So,
Yeah, well, yeah, that's like just figure out what God wants and then do that. Trying to be understood is not as hard as that, but it's because we're all in our own little got our own little idolatry structures and our own visions of the world. Sometimes it's just like not so easy to understand the guy sitting across from you.
Well, it's like I like putting stuff out. I've got all this stuff that I like. I can slow up my old content that's from years ago. And I released, like, I went public with one of my old ones when I talked about the simulation recently. And so I think you can see the character development of my own character. And then you can also see, and that's connected to everyone. Like, people might look at me and think I'm arrogant and all that. And it's like, well, you helped make me this way, right? You're a part of, if we had a relationship, you participated. And if you think I'm bad, it's like, I don't think I'm bad, but that's that. So, and then you can go back and visit these things. So if we are on the right path, we should be learning and growing and improving. And then, the hope would be that, so the audience right now might say that Gavin, he's a cocky, arrogant guy who thinks that everyone should be paying attention to him. And then it might be 5 years later, they go back and look at it and say, man, I was wrong about Gavin. That's not what he was. That's not actually who he was. I had a misinterpretation of who he was.
Yeah, sure. And I mean,
I'm depending on the YouTube
look,
timeline.
you've said from the very beginning that arrogance was a problem for you, right? That you open up front about that, which is, and guess what? The other thing is you've done is that we've spent, I forget how many hours we've spoken, but you essentially are helping me with this vision. And an arrogant man would be off doing his own thing.
That's the funny when people ignore me, laugh at me, disregard me, and all of that. It's like, I say, you're arrogant, and then they treat me that way, and it's like, oh my goodness. Well, what does an arrogant person do? Let's really define this word arrogance, because
we have evidence of your lack of arrogance just in the amount of time you've devoted to someone else's vision.
Well, and then the other part is you have the beaver and the wolf, and the wolf or the beaver can look at me and say, well, I've got this good fruit I'm doing over here, and you're doing it wrong. Like the wolf tells the beaver, you're doing it wrong, and that's an arrogant move too, to tell someone they're doing it wrong. And trying to convert someone.
Of course.
I've heard you say we need to convert people, but I look at it more like we need to invite people, and wherever they are on their path, they may and their goals, and or if they're a beaver or a wolf, they may or may not be interested at this point in time.
Yep. So, but what's interesting is we're trying to convert them to an interpretation of the Bible.
Well, the thing is, God wrote the story already. We really don't have to convert anybody.
So so we're trying to find people who will resonate with this interpretation of the Bible. I didn't write that book. I was given a pattern which, in my mind, maps on ridiculously. I've yet to find something that it doesn't map on.
You don't even. I don't even know if you and the audience want to know what just went through my head. It's like this content could become the laughing stock of of the internet for eternity if we're wrong. You know what I'm saying? But
Well,
and that's the thing. That's the thing that I remember. It's like, would an arrogant person do that? Like to know that we could be the laughing stock of the internet for all eternity if we're wrong.
Yep. And would an arrogant person admit that, you know, the 3 people that ever watched this, if we were wrong, aren't is such a, you know, because if we're right, it's going to catch on. If we're wrong, it'll go nowhere.
Well, that's what I explained. I try to explain is like, this is my contingency plan. It's like,
this is a low risk enterprise in terms of us being ridiculed, because the only way that we can garner the attention where ridiculous a risk is if it's actually right. Because if it's wrong, it's never going to go anywhere. So this has only got upside for us.
And it could be after we're dead.
Well, exactly.
Which is not an arrogant move either. Like, to do something in service of the people of the future where you don't even receive the benefit. You know, maybe we'll be part of the resurrection. You know, that's what I hope would be nice. But
but I mean, we're doing so much of this in pure faith, right? This is
at this point, it's just just trying to do what God wants me to do. That's really all it is. That's all. It's as simple as it is. If I'm a laughing stock, that'll be because God wants me to be a laughing stock. The source of laughter. It's not a terrible thing to be the source of laughter.
Well, there's of course, because you know, so the story that we're in said that there will be mocking and scoffing.
Yeah.
But the only way we will get mocked and scoffed is if this garners sufficient attention so the mockers and scoffers get in. And at that point, it's because our claim has got some legs. So there you go. There will be mocking and scoffing, but
there's also the talk of the Antichrist, and sometimes I wonder if I'm the Antichrist, right? If the Christ goes around and tells people, "Shh, no, I'm not the Christ," and if I'm someone saying, "Hey, I might be the Christ," it's like, I might be the Antichrist. I'm doing the opposite of what the Christ was doing. So and that's according to the story that a lot of people believe. So if the world needs an Antichrist, I might even be the Antichrist. I'll be the villain. You know, I know where my heart is, and I'm trying to follow God. And if God needs an Antichrist as part of the story, you know, maybe I'll be the Antichrist instead of the Christ. So
and I mean, that is a question which I've pondered heavily, and I've asked the same question of myself.
It's a good question.
and I've come to the same conclusion as you. If that is who I have to be, then that's who I have to be. But
I'm not trying to hurt anybody, and I feel good with that. Like when I went and when I meet the demons and the spirits, it comes down to is like I actually I am very convinced that we should be loving our enemies. And so, you know, I know Christ taught to love your enemies, but so in that regard, I'm like Christ. But in God, if Christ goes around saying, "Shh, don't tell anybody," it's like I'm saying, "Hey, if God wants me to be the Messiah, I'll be the Messiah, and I'll raise my hand," right? Because God has told me that I should raise my hand and say, "Hey, not only should I raise my hand and say, I'm trying to be the Messiah, I'm aiming at 2040, right? To give you some perspective. But you should do it too. You know, you should try to be the Messiah. And not just a he and a her, it doesn't have to be a gender. That's what I tell people. I see no risk. Like I'm a site reliability engineer over complex systems. I see no risk in doing this to other people. There's a risk to me. Some crazy might come and try to take me out at some point. But and it's like there's the arrogance. Why would an arrogant person with a big ego care only about themselves, put themselves out there such that someone might murder their ass, right? It's like, why would you do that?
So all I'm claiming to be is to be a doorkeeper.
Yeah.
And I'm following biblical advice there in terms of humility. Don't draw acclaim to yourself, let others acclaim you. So
where is that? Where is that?
So I heard Paul Vanderklay talk about that, and I think if you use that form, so I'll find that verse because I want to know.
Yeah.
But it's don't put yourself forward, set yourself in the back of the room, and others will elevate. You'll be elevated, and I think that is why Christ had to be pointed out by John the Baptist. So that was the pattern. That was one of the functions of John the Baptist.
Well, in a business, you people, there will be like the ideal business in my mind is you identify a need for a role, and then you would allow people to raise their hand and say, I'm interested, I'm a candidate, I would like to be interviewed and tested, right? And so to me, that seems like the proper way based on our understanding, like the amount of productivity that we've done in the world, like, is a miracle, and it's based on science, right? It's based on experiments. It's like there are proven ways to organize that the church hasn't done. The church is this, as I heard Eric, as people call Father Eric. I don't like to call him Father Eric because I'm a father and he's not. He said that Catholic Church is like a aircraft carrier. Once it gets going, it's hard to change. It's hard to get it to actually change, and which is that's true. Like, that's true of any organization, and as the organization gets large, it's harder to change that thing. But there are techniques that we've learned as a species on how to get large groups of people to change over time. So
and that's biblical as well. Is that when you are taking down your enemy, you will keep his fruit. That are you won't chop down his fruit trees. His fruit, the fruits that are good to eat, get kept.
that's the whole thing about being a tool maker.
Yeah, and those that are not, they get thrown on the fire and get dispensed with. But I mean, there's lots of this world that gets carried on into the new earth. So it is just like we're going to hit an inflection point where suddenly there's a consciousness shift, which is our mission is to be the vehicles through which that message is spread. And how it transpires is I have no idea how it's going to play out, but it'll be interesting. If it takes off, it'll be fascinating to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, there's a different. I know we got to end this, and I'm sure you're tired. I started trying to focus more on technology and on my Hero FG channel, and to move my religious politics stuff to my Right In Gavin Palmer channel, and so this will go on the Right In Gavin Palmer. But the thing on Hero FG is, I said I basically was talking about the tool maker, and so there's a difference between the tool and the content produced by the tool. And so, like, a gun is a technology, but it carries a payload and it's aimed at things, right? Sure. So it's like the gun itself is a tool, but that's just the really good example. But I think every tool is like that. And then the question for me is always like, show me the tool that has no good about it. And I know that the Bible says, you'll be turned into plowshares, right? The weapons will be turned into plowshares. So I mean, at some point it's like, are the weapons needed? Well, I mean, maybe not. I could, but I see that being a long way off. 1,000 years would be a good estimate on that one. That's a long way off.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know when the when peace reigns. Is it from the get-go? Is it right at the end? And as I said, there's this vision where Satan has to be released at the end of the 1,000 years. So that implies, there'll still be weapons of war right at the end. So, but we'll see.
Maybe we'll see.
No, we'll see, because we're in the story, and the story says that you don't end. And
Ugh.
I came into some fascinating stuff on entropy and what is reverse entropic and what is. So you might have heard that life appears to, defeat entropy, right? In that, but within the bounded system of your body or your cells. It's fascinating is that when you are cooling stuff down, that is a reverse entropic motion, and the CHE is an entropy reversing system. And I can give you videos to demonstrate that. Just thermodynamically, the CHE. So if you think of the desert as a hot, chaotic place where there's no life, by cooling it down, condensing water out, enabling life to occur, that's reversing entropy.
Does it? Yeah, we could talk about that some other time.
Yeah,
When you said we'll see it,
not tonight.
you said we'll see it. You said we'll see it, and I had the vision of all the dead people in the bleachers with popcorn watching the show or something like that.
But just remember, there was a reason why those guys initially, when they left the garden, they lived to 1,000 years or 996 years, etc., and then life gradually diminished. Is that that's pointing to the 1,000-year reign? Is that the first CHE is going to live for 1,000 years before Christ returns? And that pattern is throughout its point, and Solomon's many wives is all of this is patterns pointing to how this thing's going to unfold.
And I'll say
anyway, we must go. Yeah.
If the Jews are right, I'm cool. I'm cool. Right. If I'm cool with not being the Messiah, like I really am. I just think that we ought to be able to raise our hands and say, "I'm trying," and test me.
No. So I was going to interject earlier on, so you brought it up again. So just change the to an A.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even want to be a Messiah.
Come, but many Messiahs must still come.
I don't even want to be a Messiah.
Many must still be anointed.
I don't want to be the nor a, but I see the need for people to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'll throw my hat in the ring because I'm looking around like." I've been in situations where you look around and it's like, what the hell, people, who's going to raise their hand and step up to the plate? Bunch of sorry bitches, come on.
I'll send you that when I find that verse. I'll send it to you about not putting yourself, by not promoting yourself, let others promote you through your service and works.
There's a time and a place for everything.
Yep. All right, Gavin.
All right. Bye-bye.
We went another 20 minutes after we said we should wrap this up. So obviously having too much fun. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We had fun. Good night.
Yeah, it was good. Good night. Bye.
Bye.